Picture, for a moment, the last message you sent this morning. Perhaps it was a text to a family member, perhaps a photograph posted to a feed, a comment left beneath a friend's announcement, a reply typed with your thumbs while waiting for a train. Now hold that image in your mind and ask yourself a question you have almost certainly never asked before. When I am gone, what happens to it? Not to the sentiment behind it, that belongs to memory and to those who loved you, but to the thing itself, the pixels, the account, the profile that bears your name and your face, and in some quiet server, humming in a warehouse you will never see, continues to exist long after your heart has stopped. This is the question I wish to explore with you tonight. It is a question that our grandparents never had to consider, and one that our grandchildren will consider as ordinary as writing a will. We stand, all of us in this room, at a peculiar hinge point in human history. The first generation to live substantial portions of our lives inside machines, and therefore the first generation compelled to ask what becomes of those lives when the body that anchored them is no more. I have titled this lecture "The Ghost in the Machine," and I ask your forgiveness for the borrowed phrase. The philosopher Gilbert Ryle coined it in 1949 to mock the idea that a mind could be separated from the body it inhabits. But I find it has taken on a strange new literalness in our century, for we are now, quite genuinely, leaving ghosts inside machines, and the machines, unlike us, do not tire, do not forget, and do not die. The scale of the problem. Let me begin with the sheer scale of what we are discussing, because I suspect it will surprise you. 19 researchers at the Oxford Internet Institute published a study with a startling projection. They calculated that if the largest social network of our age continued along its trajectory, the number of deceased users could come to outnumber the living ones within roughly 50 years, and that by the year 2100, that single platform might host the profiles of nearly 5 billion dead people. 5 billion. A necropolis of unprecedented scale, larger than any cemetery ever conceived, invisible, distributed across the globe, and growing every single hour. Consider what that means. We have, without ever intending to, begun constructing the largest archive of human lives in the history of our species, not in marble or in parchment, but in the fragile proprietary formats of private corporations. Every graduation photo, every birthday greeting, every clumsy first message between two people who would go on to marry, all of it accumulating in vast digital vaults, tended not by historians or archivists, but by engineers and shareholders. The dead, in other words, are becoming a demographic, and this raises a cascade of questions that our institutions, legal, commercial, and moral, are only beginning to confront. Who owns these accounts? Who may enter them? Should they persist forever, or should they be allowed, like the body, to return to dust? And who exactly gets to decide? The illusion of ownership. Here we arrive at the first and perhaps most jarring truth of the digital afterlife, and I want you to sit with it for a moment, because it unsettles nearly everyone who hears it clearly for the first time. You do not own your accounts. You never did. When you signed up, and you did sign up, though few of us read the words we agreed to, you did not purchase a piece of property. You accepted a license. You were granted permission to use a service, under terms that the service could alter, and that permission is, in the language of the law, personal and non-transferable. The photographs may be yours in a sentimental sense. The memories are yours in every sense that matters to the human heart. But the account, the container, the login, the profile itself, is, in most cases, the property of the company, and your relationship to it ends where their terms of service say it ends. This is why, when a person dies, their family so often collides with a wall they did not know was there. They have the death certificate. They have the grief. They have sometimes the very password written on a scrap of paper in a drawer, and yet they discover that logging into a deceased loved one's account may itself violate the platform's terms, and in some jurisdictions may brush against laws written to prevent unauthorized computer access. Laws designed to stop hackers now inadvertently ensnaring grieving daughters trying to retrieve their mother's photographs. The law has scrambled to catch up. In the United States, a framework called the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, mercifully abbreviated as RUFADA, has now been adopted in one form or another by nearly every state. It attempts to give the executors of an estate a lawful path to a person's digital assets. But, and this is crucial, it establishes a hierarchy of authority. At the very top of that hierarchy sits not the will, not the court, but the tool the platform itself provides. If you use the company's own mechanism to say what should happen to your account, that instruction wins. Only if you were silent does the law fall back on your will, and only after that on the platform's default terms. The lesson embedded in that hierarchy is profound. In the digital afterlife, the platform is the sovereign, and your foresight is your only true power. The architecture of digital death. So let us turn to those tools, because the major platforms have, over the last decade, quietly built an entire architecture of digital death, and remarkably few people know it exists. Consider the largest social network. Since 2015, it has offered something called a legacy contact. You may, while living, designate a trusted person who will be granted limited stewardship of your profile after you are gone. When the account is memorialized, the platform's chosen word, the word remembering appears beside your name. Your legacy contact may pin a final message, respond to new friend requests, update your profile picture. But, and here the design reveals its philosophy, they may not read your private messages. The company decided that the intimacy of your correspondence should die with you, even as the public face of your profile endures. It is a striking editorial judgment about which parts of a self are inheritable and which are not. The photo-sharing platform, owned by that same company, offers memorialization as well, freezing the account so that it can no longer be logged into or altered, preserving it as a kind of sealed exhibit. The great search company takes a different philosophical approach entirely. Rather than a steward appointed after death, it offers an inactive account manager, a mechanism that watches for your absence. You specify a period of inactivity, say 3 months or a year. If you do not appear, if you do not log in, do not check your mail, do not stir. The system concludes you may be gone, attempts to warn you, and then, if you remain silent, notifies the people you chose and shares with them the data you permitted. It is, in a sense, a digital dead man's switch, a machine waiting patiently to notice that you have stopped existing. And the great device company more recently introduced its digital legacy program, allowing you to name legacy contacts who, armed with a special access key and a copy of your death certificate, may unlock the photographs, messages, and documents locked within your account and the cloud behind it. Notice what these 4 approaches have in common and where they differ. Each is an attempt to answer the same question, who may enter after I am gone, and each answers it differently. One appoints a steward but seals the letters. One freezes the account in amber. One waits to notice your silence. One hands over a key. There is no consensus, no standard, no shared human tradition, only the divergent design decisions of a handful of companies, each quietly legislating the afterlife for billions. The problem of the persistent ghost. Now I wish to move from the mechanical to the deeply human, because it is here that the subject acquires its true weight. What is it like to be surrounded by the digital dead? Many of you, I suspect, already know. You have felt it. You have opened an application and been prompted, cheerfully, to wish a happy birthday to someone who died 2 years ago. You have scrolled through a feed and encountered, without warning, the smiling face of a friend now buried, an algorithm surfacing memories with no knowledge that the person in them is gone. You have hovered over a message thread, seeing the little indicator that says when they were last active, and felt the floor tilt beneath you. These are the persistent ghosts, and they represent something genuinely new in the human experience of grief. For all of human history, the dead departed from our daily field of vision. They lived on in photographs we chose to display, in letters we chose to reread, in the deliberate rituals of remembrance. The visit to the grave, the anniversary, the story told at the table. Grief had an architecture of distance. We could summon the dead when we were ready and let them rest when we were not. The digital dead honor no such boundary. They arrive unbidden. They are woven into the same feeds where we conduct our ordinary business, and so grief ambushes us in the checkout line, on the train, in the idle scroll before sleep. The psychologists who study bereavement have a term, continuing bonds, for the healthy, ongoing relationship the living maintain with the dead, and there is genuine evidence that a memorialized profile can serve this need beautifully, a gathering place, a wall where friends leave messages years later, a hearth around which a scattered community keeps a flame lit. I do not wish to dismiss that. For many, these digital spaces are a mercy. But there is a shadow side, and honesty compels me to name it. When the dead never recede, when their profiles refresh and resurface and ping, grief may struggle to find its natural resolution. The wound is kept perpetually open by a machine that does not understand what it is doing. We have built systems optimized to maximize engagement, and they cannot distinguish between a living friendship to be nurtured and a departed one to be mourned. To the algorithm, you are simply a node that has gone quiet, and quiet nodes are to be re-engaged. Who are we, and who decides? Permit me now to raise the questions that keep the philosophers awake. When your profile persists after you, when it speaks in your voice, displays your face, carries forward the pattern of your opinions and your humor and your grievances, is that you? The intuitive answer is, no, of course not. It is a record, an echo, a shadow on the wall of the digital cave. But I would ask you to hold that certainty loosely, because the technology is advancing along a frightening frontier. We now possess systems capable of ingesting a person's messages, their emails, their recorded voice, and generating new utterances in their manner, not things they ever said, but things they plausibly might have said. Grief technology companies already offer to build a conversational version of your departed relative, a chatbot wearing the face of your mother, a voice on the line that sounds like your late father saying goodnight. I will not tell you whether this is a comfort or a desecration, because I do not think it is my place to decide it for you, and I suspect the answer differs from heart to heart. But I will insist that we ask the question deliberately, rather than sleepwalking into an answer chosen for us by whoever happens to build the product first. Does the dead person consent to being simulated? Can they? Who owns the model of a human being? The grieving family who commissioned it, or the company that trained it? If a simulation of you says something cruel or something the living find useful, whose words are those? These are not idle puzzles. They are arriving in our lifetimes, and the frameworks to govern them do not yet exist. And beneath all of this runs the oldest question of all, merely dressed in new clothing. Who decides? Who has the authority to speak for the dead? The family may want the account preserved as a shrine. The deceased may have wished, privately, for it to vanish. A parent may crave access to a child's messages to understand a tragedy. The child in life may have guarded those messages as fiercely private. The platform must adjudicate between the wishes of the living and the presumed wishes of the dead, and it does so largely through the blunt instruments of terms of service and the occasional court order. What, then, shall we do? I would be a poor lecturer if I left you only with disquiet and no direction. So let me turn, in closing, toward the practical and the hopeful. The single most important thing I can tell you tonight is also the simplest: decide now while you can. The entire apparatus of the digital afterlife rewards foresight and punishes silence. Set your legacy contacts, configure the inactivity managers, write down, securely and lawfully, some record of what you hold and what you wish done with it. Draft what estate planners now call a digital estate plan, and name in your will not only who inherits your house and your savings, but who inherits your archives, your photographs, your words. To do this is not morbid. It is a gift to the people who will one day sit in a room, drowning in grief, and be spared at least the added cruelty of a locked door. But I want to end on a note larger than the practical, because this subject deserves it. We are, each of us, engaged in an act of authorship that we scarcely recognize. Every post, every photograph, every message is a sentence in a book we are writing without knowing it. The book of a self that will outlast the self. The ancients built pyramids and carved names in stone to defy oblivion, and only kings and pharaohs could afford it. We have democratized immortality. The most ordinary among us now leaves behind a record more detailed, more intimate, more voluminous than any monarch of antiquity, a future historian, a curious descendant, a great-grandchild not yet born, may one day scroll through the record of your Tuesday afternoons and know you more completely than your own contemporaries did. That is a staggering power, and it is also a staggering responsibility, for the ghost we leave in the machine is in the end a portrait, and we are painting it now, stroke by careless stroke, in the ordinary business of our days. So I leave you with the question I began with, sharpened by everything we have considered, not merely what happens to your digital identity when you die, but what would you have it be? What story is your archive telling? What would you want a stranger a century hence to find? And who, while you still have breath and choice, will you trust to keep the light on, or to gently, finally turn it off? The machines will not answer these questions for us. They are not designed to. They are designed to remember relentlessly and forever. It falls to us, the living, the mortal, the ones who still can choose, to decide what our remembering should mean.